welcome the anointed ones. Never curse a good soul when it walks away, because that silence you mocked will one day echo louder than your entire existence. Chosen one, let me tell you something most people refuse to admit. Regret is not just an emotion, it's a life sentence. Psychologists say the human brain replays regret almost 5 times more often than success, and that means those who wronged you are living in a self-made prison with you as the recurring headline. They thought your presence was ordinary, but it turns out your absence has become the ghost they can't exorcise. And here's the twist that makes it almost funny. People who once told you, "We don't need you," are now living like their Wi-Fi just got cut off in the middle of a championship game. They underestimated the quiet devastation of losing someone who carried light, protection, and balance without ever bragging about it. They assumed life without you would taste sweet, but now every sip is bitter, and they can't figure out why. This isn't about payback or revenge. This is about a cosmic law they didn't respect. When you mishandle a chosen one, the punishment isn't thunder striking from the sky. It's the unbearable void that follows when that chosen one removes their presence. And that void is now eating them alive. So tonight, let's peel back the layers and uncover why your absence has become their curse, and why regret is now sitting in their living room like an uninvited guest that refuses to leave. Number 1. Your absence exposed the artificial glue holding their lives together. Your absence exposed something they never wanted to face, that you were the invisible thread holding everything together. They thought things were working because of their own strength, their own influence, or their own planning. But the reality is, you were the stabilizer in the chaos. You weren't loud about it. You weren't drawing attention to it. But your presence created a balance that kept dysfunction from fully showing its face. And the very second you stepped away, the cracks started to widen, and what was hidden under the surface couldn't stay hidden anymore. What they called family unity was really you absorbing tension before it exploded. What they called friendship was really you constantly forgiving and giving while they took. What they thought was peace in their environment was nothing but your presence shielding them from their own storm. You leaving stripped away the illusion, and now they see the truth. Nothing was truly stable. It was you all along. That's why your absence feels like a curse to them. It's not just about missing you. It's about losing the glue that made them look more functional than they actually were. Suddenly, conversations don't flow. Suddenly, arguments turn into full-blown wars. Suddenly, everyone notices the bitterness and brokenness that you used to quietly neutralize. They can't pretend anymore, because your presence was the one thing that made their dysfunction appear manageable, and the regret eats at them now, because they realize they mistook the stabilizer for the problem. They treated you like you were optional, like you were excess, when in reality, you were the very thing holding everything up. It's only now, with you gone, that they see how fragile their so-called structure really was. They thought they could do without you, but life without you revealed the weakness of the entire foundation. The irony is cruel. They may have believed they were the strong ones, that they were the ones tolerating you. But the truth they can't escape is that it was your quiet strength, your presence, your spirit that made the whole thing hold. Without you, it all unravels. And that unraveling has become their curse, a regret that keeps growing heavier every single day. Number 2. They thought you were replaceable, but replacement exposed their poverty of options. They thought you could be replaced easily. In their mind, you were just another face, another role that anyone else could step into without much difference. That was their first mistake. People like you don't come in duplicates. You're not something that can be copied and pasted into another life. The very uniqueness they overlooked is the same thing now haunting them, because every attempt to substitute you has only highlighted what they lost. When they tried to bring someone else into your place, it backfired. The so-called replacement lacked your depth, your heart, your energy. They might have had the right appearance, the right talk, maybe even the right connections, but the spirit wasn't there. And that missing spirit made everything feel empty, flat, and forced. What they were left with was a cheap imitation, a counterfeit version of what they once dismissed. Now they're surrounded by people who may look the part, but can't deliver what you naturally carried. That's where the regret set in like a slow poison. They had convinced themselves that losing you was no big deal, that someone else could fill the gap without any disruption. But instead of filling the gap, the replacements only exposed it more. Every conversation feels shallow, every interaction feels transactional, and every relationship feels disposable. You gave substance. They're stuck with shadows. The curse is that now they can't unsee it. Every time they sit with their so-called new people, they compare them to you, even if they won't admit it out loud. The laughter doesn't hit the same. The comfort isn't there. The loyalty can't be trusted. They're left constantly reminded that the original could never be duplicated. What stings the most for them is the realization that you weren't just someone passing through. You were the irreplaceable one they mishandled. And once that truth settled in, regret became a permanent guest in their soul. They thought you were replaceable, but the replacements became mirrors of their own poor judgment. And every day the weight of that truth curses them with the same question over and over. How could they let something so rare slip away? Number 3. Your withdrawal. Made their shadows impossible to hide. Your absence pulled the curtain back on everything they were trying to hide. When you were present, your light had a way of softening the rough edges, making things appear more balanced than they truly were. Without you, there was nothing to absorb the darkness, nothing to mask the bitterness or cover up the lies. Suddenly, their flaws stood naked, their secrets louder, and their true nature impossible to disguise. That's why your absence feels like a curse, because now they can't run from themselves anymore. You carried an energy that naturally shifted atmospheres. Even when they were messy, you brought clarity. Even when they were bitter, you brought calm. Even when they were dishonest, your authenticity forced some kind of check on them. But with you gone, the masks no longer hold. Their envy, their deceit, their pettiness all spill out in plain sight. The same people who thought they could hide behind charm or control are now exposed for exactly who they are. The regret cuts deep because they realize your presence was protecting them more than it was protecting you. You weren't just enduring their shadows. You were covering them, even shielding them from being seen for who they really were. Now, with that cover gone, the ugliness they thought they could keep hidden has become obvious to everyone else. Their manipulations don't work the same, their charisma falls flat, and their narratives crumble without you silently balancing the scale, and the curse of regret keeps growing because they know they can't undo it. They can't go back to the days when your light shielded their shadows. They can't recreate the atmosphere you brought. They can't rewrite the truth that has now been exposed. Your absence made the illusion impossible to maintain, and what's left behind is the raw, unfiltered version of themselves they never wanted anyone to see. That's why losing you hurts in ways they'll never admit. It wasn't just about losing someone good. It was about losing the one person whose presence made them appear better than they were. And now, stripped bare by your absence, they're left to sit with the regret of knowing they didn't just mistreat you. They destroyed their own cover in the process. Number 4. They didn't lose you. They lost the mirror that made them improve. They didn't just lose you. They lost the one thing that kept them honest with themselves. Your presence was more than company. It was a mirror. Every time they interacted with you, they were forced to measure themselves against a higher standard. Not because you preached or demanded it, but because your energy naturally exposed their mediocrity and invited them to rise above it. Around you, they were pushed to think deeper, act wiser, and treat others better. Without even realizing it, you were the reason they kept growing. When you walked away, that mirror disappeared. Now there's nothing reflecting their flaws back to them, nothing challenging their excuses, nothing making them see where they've become lazy or small-minded. At first, they probably felt relief, no more feeling judged, no more silent pressure to do better. But that relief was short-lived. Without your presence, they drifted back into old habits. Their progress stalled, their discipline slipped, their integrity weakened. That's the real sting of your absence. It's not just that they miss you as a person. It's that they miss who they were becoming because of you. They miss the version of themselves that only existed when you were around. The conversations that stretched their thinking don't happen anymore. The subtle accountability you gave them has vanished. The quiet dignity you carried is no longer the standard in the room. Without the reflection you unknowingly offered, they've shrunk back into a smaller, pettier version of themselves. And now regret festers like a wound that won't heal. Because deep down, they know the truth. It wasn't their willpower or their moral strength that made them grow. It was you. It was the way your presence brought out their better self, even when they resisted. Losing you meant losing that upward pull, and they can see the difference every time they look at their own life. They're stagnant now, unimproved, and painfully aware of it. This is why your absence feels like a curse they can't shake. You weren't just someone they knew, you were their unspoken standard, their quiet teacher, their mirror. And now they're left staring at their reflection without you, seeing clearly how far they've fallen back. Number 5. Their control collapsed when their target disappeared. They built an entire system around you without even realizing it. Every insult, every manipulation, every subtle form of control was part of a structure designed to keep you small, predictable, and within reach. You were their anchor, not in a healthy way, but in a way that gave their lives direction and purpose, even if that purpose was twisted. Their sense of power depended on keeping you under their thumb, on knowing your every move, on predicting and containing your growth. When you disappeared, that entire system collapsed overnight. The routines they built around monitoring you no longer made sense. The tactics they used to provoke or manipulate you stopped working because you weren't there to respond. The power games that gave them a sense of superiority turned into empty rituals with no one to dominate. Without their target, their identity as the one in control fell apart like a house of cards. At first, they may have pretended it didn't matter, telling themselves they'd just move on to someone else. But control isn't that simple. They didn't just lose you. They lost the blueprint of their power. All their schemes had been tailored to you, built on your reactions, your empathy, your patience. Now, in your absence, they're left with no feedback, no energy to feed off, no one to manipulate to feel important. They're stuck facing the truth. They weren't powerful. They were parasitic. This is why regret hits so hard now. They didn't realize how much of their identity was built on trying to limit yours. They called it helping, guiding, or protecting. But it was always about control. Without you there, they're exposed for what they really are. People who don't know how to function without a scapegoat, a target, or someone to dominate. And the worst part for them is that your absence hasn't just freed you. It's forced them into a kind of spiritual unemployment. They have no job, no role, no relevance, because the one person who gave their manipulative identity purpose is gone. That's the curse they live with now. They tried to build a cage around you, but you walked away and left them trapped inside their own walls. Number 6. The curse was in realizing peace never followed them, it followed you. They were convinced that once you were out of their life, everything would settle down. They painted you as the problem, the storm, the tension. They believed that pushing you out or walking away from you would finally bring them freedom, quiet, and ease. But the moment you left, the exact opposite happened. Instead of peace rushing in, there was only more chaos. The tension didn't vanish, it multiplied. The restlessness didn't subside, it deepened. What they thought was a problem with you was really a reflection of the disorder inside themselves. Your presence had been the one steadying force they didn't recognize. You carried a quiet kind of peace that shifted atmospheres without you even trying. Even in conflict, even in misunderstanding, your energy calmed things they couldn't calm on their own. When you left, that unseen stabilizer went with you. Suddenly rooms felt heavier, conversations turned into fights, their sleep grew shallow, their thoughts more scattered, and the harmony they assumed would magically appear without you never showed up. The curse for them is that they now know, without question, where the peace really was. It wasn't in their surroundings, their routines, or their plans. It was in you. They regret ever blaming you for their unrest, because your absence has proved what was always true. They weren't disturbed by you. They were disturbed by themselves. Your presence only highlighted that inner chaos and gave them a chance to find balance. Without you, there's no balance left, and now they're left to sit in the noise they tried to outrun. It's louder than ever. They can't escape it by changing rooms, changing people, or changing habits. The stillness they thought was just beyond you never existed. You were the stillness. You were the peace. And now that you're gone, they're forced to confront their own inner storm without the shelter of your energy. That realization is its own punishment. They didn't just lose a person. They lost the only presence that made them feel truly calm and steady. That's the curse of your absence, discovering that peace never followed them at all. It walked out the door with you. Number 7. Without you, their status became hollow currency. They built their status on borrowed light. As long as you were in the picture, they shone a little brighter, looked a little more important, and felt a little more valuable. Your presence was like an invisible endorsement. It made them seem trustworthy, admirable, or influential without them ever having to earn it. People noticed them because you were nearby. Doors opened for them because your name carried weight. They never stopped to ask why things seemed to work so easily for them. They just assumed it was their own charm, their own reputation, their own skill. When you stepped away, all of that evaporated almost overnight. Invitations slowed down. Attention shifted. The respect they once received began to thin out, and the opportunities they thought were theirs started drying up. It wasn't coincidence. It was cause and effect. The glow they projected wasn't theirs, it was the reflection of yours. Without your presence, their social currency deflated like a balloon losing air. The power they thought they had was never real, it was borrowed. Now they're standing in the harsh light of truth. They're discovering how little they actually built on their own, how shallow their network really is, and how much of their identity depended on proximity to you. People aren't returning their calls with the same urgency. Their name doesn't carry the same respect. The status they flaunted feels hollow, because without your silent contribution, there's nothing to hold it up. That's the sting of their regret. It's not just about missing you as a person. It's about missing the invisible benefits that came with you. They're realizing too late that you weren't just a background player in their life. You were the reason they were able to stand where they stood. Now that you're gone, the illusion has collapsed. They're exposed as ordinary, stripped of the aura they borrowed from you, and it's eating them alive. Regret has become their curse, because it's impossible to unsee the truth. They didn't just lose someone valuable, they lost the unearned credibility, the silent influence, and the hidden favor that only your presence could provide. And without it, they're left with nothing but their own reflection, smaller, dimmer, and undeniably empty. And number 8, they thought you were weak, until your absence proved their dependence. They spent so much time branding you as fragile, naive, or too nice that they started believing their own narrative. In their eyes, you were the soft one, the expendable one, the one who needed them to survive. They mistook your patience for weakness, your kindness for gullibility, and your restraint for lack of power. What they didn't realize was that your strength was never loud or showy. It was quiet, consistent, and woven into the very structure of their lives. When you finally stepped away, the truth came out faster than they expected. The systems they had built, relationships, routines, even their sense of self, started to crack. Without your reliability, their chaos multiplied. Without your steadiness, their instability was laid bare. All the little things you did without recognition, all the ways you held things together without drawing attention, suddenly became glaringly obvious in their absence. They weren't holding you up. You were holding them. This is when regret started to grow roots. They realized too late that what they called weakness was actually the strongest force in the room. You were the one absorbing tension, diffusing conflict, and filling gaps they didn't even know existed. You were the one offering forgiveness, loyalty, and consistency when everyone else was unreliable. With you gone, those unacknowledged contributions vanished, and the foundation they thought was solid began to crumble. What stings the most for them now is the humiliation of it. They see how dependent they were on someone they dismissed. They see how much of their stability was never their own, but borrowed from your strength. They see how wrong they were to confuse gentleness with fragility. And now, without your presence, they're left with the hard reality of trying to rebuild on their own, something they don't know how to do because they've never had to. Your absence flipped the entire script. The one they labeled weak turned out to be the very reason they were able to appear strong. Now, regret is their constant companion because it's impossible to escape the truth. The person they underestimated was the only one truly holding everything together. Number 9. You became the phantom in their conscience they can't escape. Even with you gone, you're still there, not in body, but in the corners of their mind where they can't switch off the lights. Every decision they make now carries a shadow of you. Every lie they told, every rumor they spread, every betrayal they committed runs on a loop like a trial they can't adjourn. It's not a ghost they're afraid of. It's the living memory of the person they mistreated. And that memory isn't passive. It's active, like a voice that won't stop cross-examining them when the room goes quiet. This is the curse they never prepared for. They thought that by pushing you out, smearing you or breaking you down, they would be free. But freedom didn't follow. Instead, your absence intensified their guilt, because there's no longer any distraction, no more next fight or next argument to keep them occupied. Without you physically present, all they're left with is the evidence of what they did, circling them like a jury that never reaches a verdict. You became the mirror they can't smash. Every time they see someone kind, it reminds them of how cruel they were. Every time they hear your name, it hits like a gavel slamming down. Even moments of success feel thin because they're haunted by the knowledge of what they destroyed. You were a test they failed publicly, and now the shame plays privately in their minds over and over. The worst part for them is the permanence of it. Memories fade, but regret rewrites itself deeper every time they try to suppress it. They may laugh, they may pretend, they may try to convince themselves they were justified, but when they're alone, at night, in silence, in prayer, in thought, you show up again, not as a person they can argue with, but as a phantom they can't silence. This is why your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. You no longer share space with them, but you've occupied something far more powerful, their conscience. And there's no eviction notice for that. They're left to live with the echo of the one they wronged, a living reminder that what they did can't be undone, only faced. Number 10. Your value increased the second you withdrew your energy. The second you pulled your energy back, everything shifted. For so long, they treated you like you were always going to be there, a constant supply of support, attention, and care they didn't have to earn. Your consistency made them careless. Your generosity made them entitled. They mistook your presence for permanence and your patience for a lack of options. But when you finally withdrew, the true weight of what you brought into their lives hit them like a delayed wave. Absence has a way of recalibrating everything. What they once overlooked became glaring. What they once dismissed began to feel precious. The things you gave so freely, your time, your wisdom, your listening ear, your quiet encouragement, suddenly became luxuries they couldn't buy anywhere else. The space you left behind wasn't just empty, it was irreplaceable. And that's when the regret they once brushed off started to grow teeth. Now, it's not just regret, it's obsession. They replay every interaction in their minds, trying to pinpoint where they went wrong. They scroll through old messages, revisit old conversations, and look for pieces of you in other people, only to come up empty. The scarcity of your presence has revealed a truth they can't escape. What they had with you wasn't normal, it was rare. And rare things only increase in value when they're gone. They're learning the hard way that access to you was the real gift. It wasn't your money, your advice, or your kindness. It was your energy itself. That quiet force you carry, that rare steadiness, that authentic spirit they couldn't find anywhere else. Without it, their world feels duller, smaller, and harder to navigate. The same person they undervalued has now become a standard they can't stop measuring others against, and nothing else comes close. This is why your absence feels like a curse they can't break. The scales of worth have tipped, and your value now towers over their old assumptions. You went from always there to unreachable, from ordinary to priceless. But for them, it's too late. They're left grasping for what they didn't protect, realizing too late that the energy they took for granted was the rarest thing they'll ever lose. Number 11. They regret learning. That access was the real blessing. They always thought the blessing was what you gave them, your help, your love, your time, your resources. They focused on the benefits, the outcomes, the things they could point to and say, "Look what I got from them." But they never understood the truth. The real blessing was never the gifts. It was you. It was being able to sit in your presence, tap into your energy, and experience the kind of spirit that changes the atmosphere of a room without even trying. Access to you was the blessing, the rare privilege that made everything else possible. But they treated that privilege like a right. They assumed they could always call you, always lean on you, always drain you, and you would always show up. They assumed your heart had no limits, your time no boundaries, your loyalty no expiration date. They mistook your openness for obligation and your generosity for weakness. And because of that, they abused what they should have cherished. Now that door is closed. Your energy is no longer on tap. Your presence is no longer available at a whim. They're outside looking in, realizing for the first time what they actually had. It's not the gifts they're grieving. They can get gifts from other people. It's not the loyalty they're missing. Loyalty without your energy feels empty. What they're grieving is the access, the ability to step into your world and experience a spirit that lifted them, balanced them, and made them feel more alive just by being near you. And that's where regret becomes its own punishment. They can't undo the way they treated you. They can't erase the moments when they ignored, dismissed, or mishandled your generosity. They can't reverse the entitlement that made them think you'd never pull back. All they're left with now is the memory of a privilege they didn't respect, and the slow realization that access to you wasn't just valuable, it was rare beyond measure. This is the part that stings the most. They thought they were blessed by what you did for them, but now they know the real blessing was simply being allowed close enough to experience who you are, and that's the one thing they'll never get back. Number 12. The curse was losing the one who saw them beyond their masks. They lived their whole life behind masks, performing roles for different people, adjusting their face to fit whatever situation made them look strongest, smartest, or most desirable. Most people only ever saw the surface. They never had to risk being truly known because nobody looked past the presentation. But you were different. You didn't stop at their smile or their stories. You saw straight through the performance and touched the parts of them they never showed anyone else. You saw their raw soul, the insecurities, the fears, the hopes they buried. And for a while that terrified them but also kept them alive. Losing you has left them exposed in the worst way. Without you, they're back to living entirely in performance mode. Every relationship now feels shallow because it is. No one challenges their act. No one looks at them deeply. No one reflects back the truth about who they are. They're surrounded by people who accept the mask, who don't care to look underneath, who only engage with the persona. It's safer but emptier, and the emptiness is starting to crush them. The regret they carry now isn't just about losing your presence. It's about losing the one place where they were real. They thought being seen was a threat, but being unseen everywhere else has become the real punishment. They can fake laughs, fake interest, fake strength, but deep down they're starving for the kind of connection they only ever had with you. And they know they'll never find it again, because people like you don't just show up twice. This is why the loss haunts them like a shadow. Every time they put on the mask now, it feels heavier. Every time they're surrounded by people who only know the surface, they feel the absence of the one who knew their depths. You weren't fooled by their illusion, and you loved them in spite of it. Losing that kind of presence means losing the one relationship that forced them to be honest with themselves. Now they're stuck in a cycle of shallow interactions, looking for what they threw away, and realizing with painful clarity that the one person who saw beyond their masks is gone for good. Number 13. Their regret is proof that your presence was their unspoken teacher. They never told you, but you were their unspoken teacher all along. Your presence was a living curriculum, quietly shaping them, challenging their beliefs, and forcing them to grow in ways they couldn't articulate. You didn't hand out lessons in a classroom style. You embodied them. Your resilience in the face of adversity showed them what true endurance looked like. Your ability to tell the truth without cruelty taught them integrity. Your compassion revealed a kind of strength they didn't know existed. You were showing them, by example, how to live with depth and dignity in a world obsessed with appearances. At the time, they didn't see it. They mistook your patience for weakness, your kindness for naivety, your boundaries for stubbornness. They thought they were the ones in control, that you were orbiting around their world, when in reality they were learning, absorbing the subtle power of your character like a student who doesn't yet realize they're in a lesson. And because they never acknowledged it, they never valued it. They took the teacher for granted. Now in your absence, life has stepped in as a harsher instructor. The lessons you once taught with grace are being taught with consequences. They're learning what loyalty means by being betrayed. They're discovering the weight of honesty by being lied to. They're tasting the loneliness that comes from pushing away the very person who carried the blueprint for their better self. Every hardship they're facing now echoes something you once embodied without needing to say a word. Their regret is not just guilt, it's recognition. They're realizing too late that your presence wasn't ordinary companionship. It was mentorship at a soul level. You didn't just show up in their life, you elevated it, even if they didn't appreciate it at the time. Now, the absence of your example is a mirror showing them everything they still haven't learned. The ache they feel isn't just about missing you. It's about missing who they were becoming when you were there. They're finally learning the truth. Losing you wasn't losing a person, it was losing a standard. And that's why their regret feels endless. Number 14. They finally learned the hardest truth. Chosen ones are never gone, only withdrawn. They always assumed you were like everyone else. They thought you'd eventually return, even if you left angry, tired, or disappointed. In their mind, people orbit power, love, and history. They always come back to familiar ground. But you aren't people. You're a chosen one. You don't orbit toxicity. You transcend it. You don't circle back to what you've outgrown. When you withdraw, it isn't a pause. It's a verdict. It's not a door waiting to be knocked on. It's a bridge burned because it was built on lies. At first, they mistook your silence for a phase, something temporary. They thought you were cooling off or teaching them a lesson before returning like nothing happened. But as days turned into weeks, then into months, regret began to mutate into panic. They began to feel the weight of your absence, not just the physical absence of your presence, but the spiritual absence of your influence. Their lives started to lose momentum because the gravitational pull of your energy was gone. The habits, plans, and manipulations they built around you started collapsing without the center they were secretly relying on. The hardest truth landed like a hammer. You weren't gone, you were withdrawn. That means the door is closed, not locked temporarily, but sealed. It means they've lost access not just to you, but to the future they would have had in your orbit. The curse they're living now is permanence. They don't just miss you, they're haunted by the knowledge that they can't ever have you back under the same terms. That gnawing sense of never again is more powerful than any punishment they could imagine. This realization shatters their illusion of control. It forces them to confront the reality that your presence was never theirs to own or demand. It was a privilege. They misused it, and now it's gone. And because chosen ones don't do reruns, they're stuck living in the ruins of what they took for granted. Their regret isn't just about the past anymore. It's about the future they forfeited. And that's the part that eats at them daily, because they now know, deep down, your withdrawal is final, and their access to what you carried is gone forever. All of this comes down to one undeniable truth. Your absence isn't just a loss, it's a reckoning. Every misstep they made, every word they twisted, every attempt to diminish you has returned as regret, sharper and heavier than they could have imagined. They thought you were replaceable, fragile, or optional. But every day without you proves the opposite. You were the balance, the mirror, the hidden strength, and the unspoken teacher they refused to see. Now that you've withdrawn, the illusion they relied on has shattered, leaving them exposed to the reality they spent so long denying. They don't just miss you. They're haunted by the truth of what they lost. Your energy, your presence, your very existence was never theirs to command, only to witness and respect. Every system they built around controlling you has collapsed. Every borrowed status has depreciated. Every mask they wore has been stripped away. You became the standard they could no longer reach, the void they can't fill, and the mirror reflecting everything they failed to become. The permanence of your withdrawal transforms absence into a curse they live with daily. This is the ultimate revelation for anyone who underestimated a chosen one. It's not the loud battles, the arguments, or the confrontations that leave the lasting mark. It's the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who cannot be confined or replicated. And when that presence is removed, the world they thought they controlled starts unraveling, leaving only regret, obsession, and the harsh reality that what they dismissed as ordinary was extraordinary all along. So let this be a lesson written not in threats or revenge, but in the power of existence itself. You didn't just leave, you withdrew with purpose, and in doing so, you revealed the truths they could no longer ignore. They are left with the weight of their mistakes, the echo of your value, and the unshakable understanding that a chosen one is never truly gone. They are only living in the consequences of losing you. If this message resonates with you, make sure to shine your light in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to hit like, because the world needs to understand the power and impact of a chosen one. God bless you.